she vowed. They'll all pay for what they did. Her name was Emily Carter. She was 30 years old. Emily's life had been unraveling ever since betrayal struck at its core. Once a hopeful newlywed in the quiet outskirts of Manchester, she found herself abandoned and mocked by those she trusted most. Her husband, James, a promising doctor from a respected family, had been stolen away by her own sister, Claire, a woman whose deceit knew no bounds. Claire's fabricated pregnancy shattered Emily's marriage, forcing a humiliating divorce. Though years had passed, the scars remained raw, festering beneath her calm exterior. Now, with a new partner urging her toward confrontation, Emily's simmering desire for justice was rekindled, and she resolved to reclaim her dignity by exposing the lies that had ruined her world. Emily sat stiffly in the cramped living room of her modest flat, the weight of the message from Claire pressing down on her chest like a physical blow. The invitation to a so-called baby shower was more than a social nicety. It was a demand laced with arrogance, a brazen reminder of the life Claire had stolen from her. The cold, curt tone of the email left no room for negotiation. £5,000 for the gift, no less. Emily's fingers trembled as she reread the words, each sentence a jab that reopened old wounds. The woman who had once ruined her marriage now expected generosity and respect, as if the past had been nothing but a forgotten quarrel. But Emily knew better. This was the spark that would ignite her long-planned revenge. The days leading up to that moment had been a slow build of frustration and silent suffering. Emily remembered the early days with James, the tender moments they shared watching obscure films, the laughter and dreams of a future that should have been theirs. But Claire's interference had been relentless, her lies carefully crafted to manipulate and destroy. Emily had endured the cruelest mockery during pregnancy, James's sneering comments about her weight gain, his cold withdrawal as she battled relentless morning sickness alone. Claire had reveled in her triumph, flaunting her false pregnancy, twisting the knife with every visit. Emily's heart had shattered again and again, each insult and betrayal a brick in the wall of her growing resolve. Enough was enough. The defining moment came one bleak afternoon when James returned home early, his face a mask of contempt and disappointment. Emily's heart sank as he surveyed the disorder around her, the endless wrappers and half-eaten snacks she consumed just to quell the nausea. His words cut deeper than any blade. "You've let yourself go. You're just a burden now," he sneered, the laugh that followed echoing cruelly in the small room. Claire stood nearby, smirking as if this was all some cruel game. Then came the final blow. The demand for divorce, cold and unyielding. Emily's protestations fell on deaf ears. James no longer saw her as a wife, only a problem to be discarded. The humiliation was complete, betrayed by the man she loved and dismissed like refuse. As James spoke of ending their marriage, Emily's world collapsed. The room felt colder, the air heavier. She watched Claire stroke her belly with a victorious smile, the fabricated story of carrying James's child hanging in the air like a cruel joke. Emily's own pregnancy, a secret she had only just discovered was a boy, was dismissed outright. The hypocrisy and callousness stung worse than any physical pain. James refused to see beyond Claire's lies, and Emily was left to bear the weight alone. The crushing despair was tempered only by a quiet fury rising within her, a refusal to be broken or forgotten. This was the moment her path to revenge began to take shape. In the solitude of night, Emily's thoughts churned relentlessly. Shock gave way to pain, pain to anger, and anger to resolve. She recalled every cruel word, every mocking glance, every moment of betrayal as if they were fuel to a fire. The injustice of being cast aside, the humiliation of being mocked while vulnerable, and the betrayal by blood kin, all of it crystallized into a determined clarity. Revenge was no longer just a distant dream. It was a necessity. She would not allow Claire's lies to go unpunished, nor James's cruelty to define her future. Quietly, she vowed to reclaim her dignity and expose the truth, whatever it took. Fate offered its cruel twist when Emily, through her new job at a local department store, met Jonathan Hughes, a respected manager known for his integrity and strategic mind. Jonathan's kindness and insight became her anchor, and soon, their relationship blossomed into love and mutual respect. It was Jonathan who first noticed the subtle signs of Claire's continued interference. A message here, a sly remark there, and proposed a plan to confront the past head-on. When Emily showed him Claire's latest audacious demand, Jonathan's eyes narrowed with understanding. He promised her that this time justice would not be denied. Together, they would turn Claire's own arrogance against her. Jonathan's meticulous investigation uncovered damning evidence. Records of Claire's lavish spending on credit cards linked to the family business, complaints from staff about her manipulations, and the long-hidden truth behind her false pregnancy. Armed with these revelations, Emily's quiet strength grew. The power dynamic shifted. No longer the victim, she was now the one holding the cards. The hypocrisy Claire had cloaked herself in was stripped away, revealing the deceit and selfishness beneath. Emily prepared to expose everything, knowing that once the truth was unleashed, there would be no going back. The confrontation was electric, a storm of accusations and revelations that shattered the facade Claire had so carefully constructed. With Jonathan's family present as witnesses, Emily presented the evidence, statements, receipts, and testimonies that left Claire speechless and exposed. The room crackled with tension as James, confronted with the truth, realized the extent of the deception he had been part of. The once confident Claire began to falter, her smugness replaced by desperation. The social circle that had once admired her now recoiled in shock. Emily's quiet retaliation had reached its crescendo. Justice was no longer a dream but a looming reality. As the dust settled, Emily stood poised on the brink of reclaiming her life. The path ahead promised vindication but also new challenges. Would James accept his mistakes? Could Claire recover from the fall? Emily's daughter played quietly nearby, unaware of the storm that had passed but destined to benefit from her mother's strength. Jonathan's hand in hers was steady and warm, a promise of support and love. The final act was yet to unfold, the moment before reckoning hanging thick in the air. Emily's lips curled into a determined smile. This was only the beginning. The question now was not if revenge would be served, but how far she would go to claim it. Emily sat stiffly on the worn sofa in her modest Manchester flat, the cold glow of her laptop screen illuminating her tense expression. The email from Claire was there, glaring back at her, short, curt, and dripping with entitlement. Babies arrived. Expecting £5,000 for the shower gift. The words felt like a slap, a brazen demand from the sister who had stolen her husband and shattered her life years ago. Emily's fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertain how to respond. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to bury the pain and move on. But another darker part stirred, the part that remembered every cruel word, every betrayal, and whispered that it was time to stop running. The flat was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the distant hum of traffic outside. Emily's thoughts drifted back to the early days with James, how they met during university, their shared love of classic films, their shy conversations that blossomed into something hopeful. James had seemed perfect then. Kind, ambitious, someone who shared her dreams of a future filled with love and family. But beneath the surface, the cracks were already forming. Emily remembered the first time she felt the weight of his disapproval, the subtle sneers when her health faltered during pregnancy, the way his eyes would drift coldly to her swollen frame rather than meet hers with empathy. Claire's visits had always been a strange mix of false concern and sharp jabs. Emily recalled one afternoon when Claire showed up unannounced, a smug smile playing on her lips as she surveyed the chaos of wrappers and half-eaten snacks scattered across the kitchen. "Oh, I'm used to this place," Claire had said, as if that made the mess acceptable, as if Emily's suffering was some kind of joke. Emily had tried to hold on to hope then, thinking maybe James would see past the lies, that the truth would eventually come to light. But Claire's carefully spun web of deceit was stronger than she realized. The cruelest blow was when Claire claimed to be pregnant, a story so convincing it tore her marriage apart. Emily's heart tightened as she remembered the day James confronted her, his voice sharp and cold. "You've let yourself go. You're like a burden now," he had said, laughing cruelly as she struggled to explain the relentless sickness that forced her to eat constantly just to keep the nausea at bay. The humiliation stung deeper than any physical pain. And then the final betrayal, James demanding a divorce, his eyes void of the love they once held. Claire stood by his side, triumphant and unapologetic, the sister who should have been her ally now her greatest enemy. Now, years later, Claire's audacity remained unchecked. The email demanding thousands of pounds was not just a financial insult, but a reminder that the past had not been forgotten. Emily's jaw tightened, her resolve hardening. This time she would not be the victim. This time she would fight back. With a slow breath, she closed the laptop and looked toward the window, the gray Manchester sky reflecting the storm brewing inside her. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with pain, but one thing was clear. Emily Carter was no longer willing to be silenced. Her revenge was just beginning. The days leading up to the confrontation were a quiet storm inside Emily's mind. Each moment was heavy with memories she had tried to bury, but that now clawed their way to the surface. She thought back to the early years with James, the shy smiles exchanged over cups of tea in the university library, the late-night conversations about dreams and futures. James had seemed so different then. Attentive, kind, supportive. But as Emily's pregnancy progressed, so did the distance between them. The nausea that consumed her left her exhausted and vulnerable. And instead of comfort, James offered cold judgment. His laughter at her weight gain echoed in her ears, a cruel soundtrack to her suffering. Claire's presence was a constant provocation. Emily remembered the sharpness in her sister's voice when she casually dismissed Emily's hopes for a daughter, mocking her dreams of shopping trips and matching outfits. "Does James even know it's a girl?" Claire had asked with a smirk, as if her ignorance was a weapon to wound. It was Claire who had twisted the truth, fabricating a tale of carrying James's child. A boy no less, to dismantle Emily's world. That lie had crept into every corner of their lives, poisoning relationships and turning friends into bystanders. Emily's heart had broken not just from loss, but from betrayal by the one person who should have stood by her. The final blow came when James, his face set with cold resolve, declared he could no longer see Emily as the woman he once loved. "You're always eating, always tired," he said, voice dripping with contempt. "I can't do this anymore." Emily's protests about morning sickness fell on deaf ears, drowned out by Claire's triumphant smile as she leaned in, whispering venomous words about self-control and worth. Watching them, Emily felt the depth of her isolation. Mocked by the man she loved, dismissed by her own sister. The humiliation was unbearable, a wound that cut deeper than any physical pain. And yet, beneath the despair, a quiet flame began to glow. An unspoken promise that this injustice would not stand. Emily's thoughts spiraled in the silence of her flat. How had things come to this? The woman she once called sister had become her tormentor, her husband her betrayer. But with every painful memory, a steely resolve took root. She would not be the broken woman they believed her to be. She would gather strength from the very wounds they inflicted. The plan was not yet clear, but the seed of revenge had been planted. Emily knew that in order to reclaim her life, she would have to face the past head-on, and make those who wronged her pay for their cruelty. The moment that shattered Emily's world began quietly, almost insignificantly, on a damp autumn afternoon in her small flat. James came home earlier than expected, his face shadowed with irritation. Emily, weak from relentless morning sickness, sat surrounded by the remnants of her latest attempt to quell the nausea, crumpled wrappers, half-eaten biscuits, and an array of sweet pastries scattered haphazardly across the table. She tried to smile weakly, but the fatigue weighed heavily in her eyes. "Emily, what on earth is this mess?" James's voice cut through the room like a sharp wind. His gaze swept over the clutter, resting momentarily on her swollen frame before settling on her face with a dismissive sneer. She opened her mouth to explain, to tell him how the constant nausea forced her to eat just to keep the sickness at bay, but his words came too quickly. "You're eating yourself into a pig," he spat, laughter laced with cruelty following his insult. "You've given up. This isn't the woman I married." Emily's heart shattered in that instant. She wanted to cry, to scream, but all that escaped was a quiet sob. The man she had loved, who once held her hand tenderly, now looked at her like a stranger, disgusted, impatient, and cold. Then Claire appeared, as if summoned by the commotion, her smirk sharper than ever. "That's right. You're pathetic," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "And the baby you're carrying? Not even worth the trouble. James deserves better." Emily's breath caught in her throat. The room felt like it was closing in around her. The betrayal was complete. Her own sister standing beside her husband, gloating over her downfall. James didn't hesitate. "I want a divorce," he said bluntly, eyes locked on Emily's. "I can't see you as a wife anymore." Emily's world spun. How could he say this while she battled sickness and loneliness? How could he believe Claire's lies over her truth? The humiliation was overwhelming. She was discarded like a worn-out coat, left to pick up the pieces alone. But beneath the crushing pain something shifted. Emily's tears dried. The echoes of mockery and betrayal forged a new steel in her heart. She would not be broken by this. This injustice, this humiliation was the seed of a fire she was determined to fuel. A fire that would burn away the lies and expose the truth for all to see. The room felt suffocating, thick with tension and unspoken accusations. James's words hung in the air like a death sentence, and Claire's triumphant smile was a dagger twisting in Emily's chest. As James turned his back and walked toward the door, his voice cold and final, Emily's resolve began to harden. The humiliation, the betrayal, she could no longer bear the weight of silence. Her world had been ripped apart, but now she saw clearly. She would not be the victim forever. Claire's mocking laughter echoed in Emily's ears. "You'll never be enough for him," she sneered, her tone dripping with cruel satisfaction. "Just look at you, weak, sickly, and useless." Emily's cheeks burned with shame and fury. For years she had carried the pain in silence, swallowing the insults and pretending to be strong. But in that moment, something inside her snapped. The quiet woman who had endured so much was gone, replaced by someone fierce and unyielding. No longer would she let Claire's lies dictate her life. James paused at the door, glancing back briefly, his face a mask of cold detachment. "We're done," he said simply. Emily felt a hollow ache, but beneath it was a growing fire. She realized that the man she had once loved was lost to her forever, swallowed by his own selfishness and Claire's deceit. But this ending was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of a reckoning. As the door clicked shut behind him, Emily sank into the worn armchair, her mind racing. The betrayal was personal, but it was also public. Claire's lies had poisoned relationships, destroyed reputations. And now, with her sister's newest demand dangling like a challenge, Emily knew what she had to do. She would gather the pieces of her shattered life and build something stronger. Revenge would not be loud or reckless. It would be quiet, precise, and devastating. The time had come to expose the hypocrisy, to reclaim her dignity, and to make those who had wronged her pay dearly. In the stillness of her flat, Emily sat alone, her thoughts a turbulent sea of pain, shock, and simmering anger. The betrayal she had endured was not just a fracture of love, but a deep wound to her very identity. She had trusted James, believed in their future, and counted on Claire's blood ties to offer support. Instead, she had been ridiculed, discarded, and replaced. The humiliation clung to her like a second skin, and yet beneath that suffocating weight, a quiet fire began to kindle. Her mind replayed every cruel word James had uttered, the laughter, the insults, the cold dismissal, as if etching them onto her soul. But alongside the sting of those memories was a growing clarity. This was not the end, it was a call to arms. She would not crumble beneath their scorn. Instead, she would channel her pain into purpose. The injustice she had suffered was a burden she would carry no longer. Emily's reflections deepened. She thought of her unborn child, a son she had kept secret, the living proof that Claire's lies had not only destroyed her marriage but sought to erase her very existence. The thought steeled her resolve. For her child, for herself, she would rise. Revenge would not be about loud confrontations or reckless outbursts. It would be a calculated, quiet storm, a dismantling of Claire's falsehoods, a reclaiming of her own story. She pictured the moment when the truth would surface, the faces of those who had mocked and betrayed her falling away to stunned silence. Emily vowed to expose the hypocrisy that had allowed Claire to thrive on deceit, to reveal the cracks in the perfect facade. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but Emily no longer feared the darkness. It was in that darkness she would find her strength, and in her silence she would prepare her strike. The game had changed, and Emily Carter was ready to play for keeps. Fate, it seemed, had a way of tipping the scales when least expected. Emily's chance arrived quietly, wrapped in the ordinary routines of her new life. After the divorce, struggling to keep afloat as a single mother, she had taken a job at a local department store. Not glamorous but honest work. It was there she met Jonathan Hughes, a manager known for his sharp mind and unwavering integrity. Their initial conversations were casual, born from chance encounters among the aisles, but something about Jonathan's warmth and steadiness drew Emily in. Unlike James, he saw her strength beneath the surface, never judging her for the scars she carried. One afternoon, as Emily shared the latest brazen demand from Claire, the impossible £5,000 gift request, Jonathan's expression darkened with understanding. "This isn't just about money," he said quietly, eyes sharp with insight. "It's a power play. She thinks she can bully you because she's always gotten away with it." His words sparked something in Emily. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this. Jonathan's background in negotiation and strategy became a beacon of possibility. He promised to help her navigate the tangled web Claire had spun, to turn Claire's own arrogance into a weapon against her. Emily agreed, cautiously at first, but the seed of opportunity had been planted. The days ahead would not just be about survival, they would be about reclaiming control. With Jonathan by her side, Emily began to see a path forward. One where justice was not just a dream but an achievable goal. The game had shifted, and the quiet woman who had been crushed was now gathering strength for her comeback. Jonathan's investigations quickly unearthed what Emily had long suspected but lacked proof of. Delving into Claire's recent activities, he uncovered a trove of evidence that shifted the balance of power decisively. Among the findings were extravagant purchases charged to a company credit card, linked to the very clinic James's family owned. The same clinic that Claire had married into. Luxury handbags, designer watches, expensive dinners. The bills piled up to a staggering sum that far exceeded any reasonable means. But what hit hardest was the revelation that Claire had been caught on multiple occasions boasting about her manipulations, fabricating a pregnancy, lying to tear Emily and James apart, all while flaunting her newfound status. Jonathan explained the significance carefully. "This isn't just financial recklessness," he said. "It's a pattern of deceit. We have witnesses, staff members who remember her bragging about the fake pregnancy, mocking Emily behind her back. These aren't just accusations anymore. They're documented facts." Emily listened, her heart pounding as the pieces fell into place. The sister who had once held her down was now exposed, vulnerable to the same humiliation she had inflicted on Emily. Armed with this knowledge, Emily felt a surge of empowerment unlike anything before. The quiet rage that had simmered beneath the surface was now focused and sharp. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. The hypocrisy Claire had cloaked herself in was unraveling, and Emily was ready to pull the threads. Together with Jonathan, she began to plan the moment when the truth would come crashing down, when the facade of innocence would shatter, and justice would finally be served. The scales were tipping, and Emily stood poised to reclaim everything that had been stolen from her. The day of reckoning arrived like a gathering storm, charged with electric tension that crackled beneath every word spoken in the elegant drawing room of Claire's immaculate home. Emily, flanked by Jonathan and his family, stepped inside with a quiet confidence that belied the turmoil churning beneath her calm exterior. The room was filled with subtle glances and forced smiles, but the atmosphere shifted palpably as Emily laid out the evidence. A meticulously compiled dossier of credit card statements, witness testimonies, and recorded admissions of deceit. Claire's face, once so smug and untouchable, twitched with barely concealed panic as Jonathan detailed each accusation. The luxurious purchases she had hidden, the lies about a phantom pregnancy, the mocking conversations that had humiliated Emily, all were exposed in brutal clarity. The gathered guests, including members of Jonathan's family and mutual acquaintances, watched in stunned silence as the carefully constructed image of Claire crumbled before their eyes. James, too, stood motionless, his expression unreadable as the truth he had ignored for so long was laid bare. The tension reached a fever pitch when Claire, desperate and cornered, lashed out with bitter accusations, attempting to discredit Emily's character. But the damage was done. Emily's steady voice cut through the chaos, her words measured and resolute. She was no longer the broken woman they had dismissed but a force fueled by truth and justice. The hypocrisy that had shielded Claire was stripped away, revealing the cold reality beneath. The room seemed to hold its breath, caught in the gravity of the moment. Revenge was no longer a distant hope but an inevitable outcome, and Emily was ready to claim it. As the confrontation reached its peak, the room hung heavy with unspoken truths and shattered illusions. Claire's facade crumbled completely, her defenses broken by the weight of undeniable evidence, and the quiet strength radiating from Emily. James's eyes, once filled with doubt and coldness, now reflected a painful mix of regret and disbelief. The relatives and acquaintances who had gathered, expecting a polite reunion, found themselves witnesses to a reckoning long overdue. Emily took a slow breath, her gaze steady and unwavering. This was the moment she had fought for. Not just to expose the lies, but to reclaim her dignity and secure a future for herself and her son. Jonathan's firm hand on her shoulder was a silent promise of support, grounding her as the final pieces of the past fell into place. The air was thick with tension, every word hanging like a verdict waiting to be delivered. But just as Emily prepared to speak, the front door opened. A figure stepped inside. Unexpected, silent and watching. The room froze, eyes darting toward the newcomer. The moment hung poised on a knife edge, the promise of justice and retribution balanced against an uncertain future. Emily's lips curled into a knowing smile. The battle was far from over, but the tide had turned irrevocably. The quiet woman who had been broken was now a storm about to break loose, and no one, not even Claire, would escape the consequences.